During the 1980s, Big John Studd stood out as one of the era's most formidable villains, a colossal force who made celebrated heroes like Hulk Hogan and Andre the Giant seem even more extraordinary by comparison. In an age where sheer size was equated with greatness, John relentlessly pushed his physical limits, sculpting his physique to an immense 364 pounds through any means available to him. However, in 1994, physicians delivered a truly shattering diagnosis to John. He was given just a single month to live. The man who would become this towering figure, John William Minton, was born on February 19, 1948, in Butler, Pennsylvania. Long before he ever stepped into a wrestling ring, he served as a military police officer in the United States Army, where his incredible stature was undoubtedly an asset in maintaining order. He received his training from the legendary Killer Kowalski, a detail that is particularly important because many giants in the wrestling world could have simply relied on their size to succeed. The very fact that John chose to learn from Kowalski, who is widely regarded as one of wrestling's most skilled trainers, demonstrates his ambition to be far more than just another towering spectacle in the ring. John officially began his wrestling career as the Mighty Minton in the summer of 1972 for the NWA Hollywood territory. Merely a few months into his career, he transitioned to the Worldwide Wrestling Federation under the new persona of Chuck O'Connor, rounding out that year by facing off against established superstars like Chief Jay Strongbow and the powerful Gorilla Monsoon. John remained a part of the WWF roster until February of 1973, after which he took a brief hiatus from the sport before re-emerging with Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling in January of the following year. Upon his arrival in Mid-Atlantic Wrestling, he continued to perform under the Chuck O'Connor name. It was here that he began to heavily feature in tag team competition. He frequently found himself partnered with a formidable lineup of wrestlers that included the likes of Super Destroyer, the fearsome Ivan Koloff, and a young Ric Flair. He dedicated roughly a year to that promotion, with moderate but not spectacular success, primarily competing in tag team bouts. In January 1975, John made his way to the AWA, still working as Chuck O'Connor, where he experienced a mix of victories and defeats before making his return to the WWF in 1976. This time, he was repackaged as Executioner 2, forming a menacing duo with Executioner 1, who was revealed to be none other than his original mentor, Killer Kowalski, with the legendary Captain Lou Albano guiding their careers as manager. Their partnership quickly yielded gold, as they captured the Tag Team Championships in May of 1976. The team's ranks would later swell when Nikolai Volkov was introduced as Executioner 3. John eventually parted ways with the Worldwide Wrestling Federation in 1977, choosing to compete in various Texas-based NWA promotions, most notably Houston Wrestling and NWA Big Time Wrestling. Throughout this chapter of his career, he adopted the name Big John Studd while in Big Time Wrestling and was known as Captain USA over in Houston. He was involved in several high-profile encounters, including a monumental win against the ferocious Bruiser Brody in a Loser Leaves Texas match, a victory that also secured him the NWA American Heavyweight title. His string of successes did not stop there, as he later claimed the NWA Hawaii Tag titles alongside his partner, Buddy Rose. When he eventually circled back to Mid-Atlantic, he and Ric Flair teamed up to seize the NWA Mid-Atlantic Tag titles from the popular duo of Paul Jones and Ricky Steamboat. John was a mainstay in the Mid-Atlantic territory until 1980, at which point he transitioned to the AWA. There, he was presented as an absolutely unstoppable behemoth who consistently defeated respected wrestlers such as Dino Bravo and the wild Mad Dog Vachon. Following incredibly successful stints in both Georgia Championship Wrestling and the CWF, which featured a series of legendary clashes with the American Dream Dusty Rhodes, Big John Studd made his monumental return to the WWF in November 1982 for what would become the most iconic period of his entire career. During this period, particularly in the early 1980s, Andre the Giant was one of the very few wrestlers who could be considered a true giant, a genuine spectacle of nature within the WWF. When John Studd made his entrance, he was a man who physically dwarfed the vast majority of the roster and was booked as an overwhelming force designed to demolish anyone who stood in his path. Big John Studd was the quintessential villain. He possessed immense size, a perpetually mean disposition, and a reputation for ending his matches with brutal efficiency. Under the guidance of his manager, the classy Freddie Blassie, he evolved into the perfect, monstrous antagonist, often bringing a stretcher down to the ring as a chilling promise of the fate that awaited his opponents. This intimidating presence naturally propelled him toward championship opportunities, where Big John Studd would frequently challenge the WWF's beloved golden boy of that era, Bob Backlund. However, these intense title matches would almost always conclude inconclusively, typically by a countout or a disqualification to protect both men's status. This escalating series of events brings us to the famous Body Slam Challenge. The ever-boastful, classy Freddie Blassie and Big John Studd began proclaiming that John was a man who simply could not be body slammed. It was presented as an utterly impossible feat that no mortal could ever hope to achieve. Brimming with confidence in their assertion, Blassie and Studd put their money where their mouth was, offering a prize of $10,000, which was later increased to $15,000, to any individual who dared to step into the ring and hoist the giant from his feet. Of course, Andre the Giant was the one competitor that everyone in the world believed possessed the strength to do it. The moment Andre attempted to slam Studd, Freddie Blassie predictably interfered to prevent it from happening, an act which ignited a tremendously lucrative and memorable feud between the two colossal athletes. From that point forward, Studd and Andre engaged in numerous high-stakes matches all across the country, with their rivalry even escalating to brutal battles contested inside the confines of a steel cage. The intense feud with Andre the Giant catapulted John's career into the stratosphere. Their matches were a massive box office draw, which in turn secured John even more opportunities to challenge for the heavyweight championship. In the build-up to the very first WrestleMania, Studd was positioned in a series of matches against Hulk Hogan that felt fundamentally different from the champion's usual title defenses. Normally, when Hogan defended his championship, the outcome was a foregone conclusion. But Studd presented such a credible and imposing threat that he made audiences genuinely question whether he might be the one to finally dethrone the Hulkster. John embodied every quality the WWF desired in a top-tier villainous champion. He had the astonishing size, the in-ring skill, the perfect menacing look, and a proven track record of drawing massive crowds from his feud with Andre. Although he was never successful in capturing the championship from Hogan, their matches were consistently compelling and well executed. Interestingly, the two had actually faced each other before in Japan during a 1983 tour for New Japan Pro Wrestling. In a humorous twist of fate, Andre the Giant was also on that tour and even formed a tag team with Studd, perfectly illustrating how drastically different wrestling storylines and allegiances were in Japan compared to the United States. Sometime later, Studd aligned himself with Bobby Heenan's notorious stable after he and another Heenan family member, the powerful Ken Patera, were disqualified during a tag team match against Andre the Giant and S.D. Jones. Following the match, Studd and Patera launched a vicious 2-on-1 assault on Andre, culminating in them cutting his signature long hair in the center of the ring. This hair-cutting incident was a monumental angle at the time. Wrestling fans were absolutely incensed, reacting with pure outrage at the sight of Andre the Giant being so thoroughly beaten down and publicly humiliated. In that era, absolutely no one treated Andre the Giant with such disrespect. So witnessing him being so vulnerable and embarrassed in the middle of the squared circle was a truly stunning and unforgettable moment. Seeking vengeance, Andre agreed to face Stud's $15,000 body slam challenge at the inaugural WrestleMania. The conditions of the match were incredibly high stakes. If Andre could successfully slam Stud before the time limit expired and without being slammed himself, he would win the cash prize. However, if Andre failed in this monumental task, he would be forced into permanent retirement from professional wrestling. While the WWE often attributes the smashing success of the first WrestleMania to Hulk Hogan, Mr. T, and the heavy celebrity involvement at Madison Square Garden, and those elements were undeniably vital for attracting mainstream media attention, the contribution of Andre and Stud deserves far more recognition. The Body Slam Challenge was unquestionably a primary attraction for WrestleMania in 1985, with countless fans tuning in, desperate to see if Andre could not only win the money, but also exact his revenge on his tormentor. The match itself was brief, but executed to perfection. Andre demonstrated his overwhelming power against Big John Studd, and the moment he finally lifted and slammed him to the canvas, the audience exploded in what was easily one of the loudest ovations of the entire night. After his victory, Andre triumphantly grabbed the bag of money and began joyfully tossing bills out to the ecstatic fans in attendance. While the bout was hardly a clinic in technical wrestling, it delivered an iconic, feel-good moment that is a much more significant piece of WrestleMania's legacy than it's often given credit for. Following the events of WrestleMania 1, Stud formed a new alliance with another monstrous member of Bobby Heenan's group, the intimidating King Kong Bundy. Together, they created one of the most physically imposing tag teams in the history of the promotion. All through 1985 and well into 1986, the gargantuan duo of Bundy and Stud continued their relentless war against Andre the Giant. To even the odds, Andre enlisted a rotating cast of fan-favorite allies to fight by his side, partnering with megastars like Hulk Hogan, Hillbilly Jim, and the Junkyard Dog in epic battles against Stud and Bundy. Looking back, the powerhouse team of King Kong Bundy and Big John Studd feels somewhat overlooked in wrestling history, which seems unjust considering what an incredibly intimidating and effective pair they were. The core problem really stemmed from the WWF's booking philosophy at the time, which was heavily focused on ensuring the fans went home feeling satisfied. The villains primarily existed to make the heroic figures appear invincible, and Bundy and Stud were cast perfectly in this role. While they certainly had their share of dominant moments, when the truly significant matches took place, they were almost always destined to lose. That was simply the nature of being a top-level antagonist back then. And to their credit, both Bundy and Stud performed their roles flawlessly. One has to wonder, though, that if they had been allowed to secure more victories in major encounters, their legacy as a team would likely be remembered much more fondly today. It wasn't that villainous teams never achieved success in the mid-80s WWF. Talented groups like the Hart Foundation and the Dream Team certainly held their own. But when your opponents were titans like Andre the Giant and Hulk Hogan, it was an entirely different scenario. Your job was to ultimately enhance their legendary status. While King Kong Bundy was elevated to a main event showdown against Hulk Hogan at WrestleMania 2, Big John Studd found himself participating in the famous Battle Royal that featured a unique mix of professional wrestlers and star players from the NFL. Studd was instrumental in tossing out William the Refrigerator Perry. But in a strange turn of events, he was eliminated right after a sportsmanlike handshake with the very same man. Ultimately, Andre the Giant claimed victory in the Battle Royal, while Hulk Hogan defeated Bundy, reinforcing the classic narrative where the heroes triumph. Following the spectacle of WrestleMania 2, both Bundy and Studd found themselves embroiled in a new conflict with a mysterious faction known as the Machines. To understand this, we need a little backstory. Andre had been absent from several scheduled bouts against Bundy and Studd, which gave Bobby Heenan the perfect excuse to have him suspended from the WWF. Behind the scenes, however, a different story was unfolding. Andre's health was in serious decline. He was overseas filming the iconic movie The Princess Bride, and he was looking to ease up on his demanding wrestling schedule. Upon his return, Andre was cleverly disguised under a mask, adopting the persona of the Giant Machine, an enigmatic wrestler purported to be from Japan. He formed a tag team with another masked figure, Super Machine, who was secretly the wrestler Bill Eadie. The disguise fooled almost no one. It was painfully obvious that the colossal figure moving with Andre's unmistakable gait was Andre himself. Despite the transparency, Bobby Heenan relentlessly tried to expose the Giant Machine's true identity, yet he could never produce the concrete evidence needed to make it official. After a while, the Giant Machine character simply vanished from the scene, and Andre the Giant returned as himself. Because Heenan and his associates had failed to ever remove the mask, they were left with no leg to stand on, concluding a wonderfully crafted piece of wrestling narrative. As 1986 drew to a close, the WWF began planting the seeds of discord between King Kong Bundy and Big John Studd, showcasing escalating arguments between the two partners. All signs pointed towards a colossal showdown between the two at WrestleMania 3. But in a surprising move, Studd opted to walk away from the sport, choosing to retire at the height of his fame within the World Wrestling Federation. When Big John Studd made his return to the WWF in December of 1988, speculation was rampant about his motivations. One prevailing theory was that he was aware of a grave illness and aimed to secure a substantial income before being forced into permanent retirement. Another perspective suggested that the WWF orchestrated his comeback because Andre the Giant was nearing the end of his career, and the company urgently needed another larger-than-life figure to take his place on the roster. While it's widely agreed that Andre was irreplaceable, the real motive behind Studd's 1988 return is still debated. By the time 1989 rolled around, the Big John Studd in the ring was a shadow of the dominant force that fans had once known. The landscape of the WWF had shifted. The roster was now saturated with colossal athletes, which diminished the spectacle of Studd's sheer size. Compounding this issue was the undeniable fact that this new generation of giants possessed a level of agility that Studd simply couldn't match. Casting him as a heroic figure, or babyface, presented another significant challenge, particularly since he no longer had the masterful Bobby the Brain Heenan serving as his mouthpiece. It's not that Studd was incapable of cutting a promo. He was perfectly competent on the microphone. But following a master orator like Heenan was an impossible act. Any solo effort was inevitably going to seem like a considerable downgrade in comparison. Furthermore, the WWF of 1989 was a vibrant world of flamboyant, charismatic personalities who were exceptionally skilled talkers. Placed alongside these larger-than-life figures, Studd's more traditional approach felt dated and out of place. His official return was staged on the set of the Brother Love show. Initially, Bobby Heenan was ecstatic, assuming Studd would be rejoining his Heenan family stable. However, Studd flatly rejected the offer, citing the presence of his old nemesis, Andre the Giant, who was now allied with Heenan. This surprising act of defiance instantly cast Studd as a fan favorite. A major highlight of Studd's comeback was his victory at the 1989 Royal Rumble, a decision by the WWF that caught many by surprise. The widespread expectation was that either the Million Dollar Man Ted DiBiase or the Big Boss Man would be the last one standing. In that era, a Royal Rumble victory didn't come with the guaranteed championship match it does now, but it was nevertheless a monumental accomplishment. For Studd, it was a career-defining moment that remains etched in the memory of longtime fans. His final high-profile appearance came at WrestleMania 5, where he took on the role of special guest referee for a heated contest between Jake the Snake Roberts and his longtime adversary, Andre the Giant. The bout concluded abruptly after Andre was disqualified for a blind-sided attack on Studd himself. Just a few months after this event, on June 4th, Big John Studd competed in what would be his very last match for the WWF. His departure from the company stemmed from disputes over his pay, which he felt was inadequate. According to some accounts, he abruptly packed his bags and walked out in the middle of a live event, vowing never to come back. Whispers circulated that Jim Herd was keen on recruiting him for WCW, following his exit from the WWF. However, Studd had grown weary of the relentless travel schedule that the life of a professional wrestler demanded, prompting him to choose full-time retirement instead. During the autumn of 1993, just as life seemed to have settled into a peaceful routine for John Minton, he made a deeply unsettling discovery: a noticeable lump under his arm. Although the lump was painless, he wisely sought medical advice. The consultation led to a devastating diagnosis. Physicians found a massive tumor in his chest cavity. The news was catastrophic. He had cancer, and his world was instantly turned upside down. This life-altering diagnosis arrived after a long career spent in an era of wrestling that placed an immense premium on performers having physiques that were truly larger than life. In line with many of his peers from the 1980s, John had felt the constant, unspoken pressure to not only maintain, but also augment his already formidable frame to satisfy the expectations of both the fans and the industry itself. Even though he was a naturally huge individual, the grueling physical demands of professional wrestling frequently pushed performers to use performance-enhancing substances to preserve their muscle mass and speed up recovery from injuries. It was a tragic link that John himself would later publicly acknowledge, connecting his cancer diagnosis directly to his past use of these substances. His specific diagnosis was Hodgkin's lymphoma, a disease his doctors believed was connected to his prolonged use of steroids. It was a truth he courageously shared with the public, hoping it would serve as a cautionary tale. His close friend, superstar Billy Graham, later recounted that John had confided in him, expressing deep remorse over his steroid use and his firm belief that it was a primary factor in his illness. His situation was a heartbreaking outcome from an era defined by excess, where even the most naturally imposing giants felt compelled to push their physical limits into dangerous territory. Demonstrating the same tenacity he showed in the ring, John confronted his cancer directly, immediately starting a course of chemotherapy. The treatments were incredibly harsh, but they appeared to be effective as the tumor began to recede, and his overall health showed signs of improvement. His medical team grew cautiously optimistic, with some even speculating that a return to the wrestling ring could be possible within 6 months. This glimmer of possibility was a much-needed beacon of hope in an otherwise bleak period. Tragically, in 1994, the cancer came back with a vengeance. His doctors advised that a bone marrow transplant was the best course of action, but they ran into a major roadblock. A compatible donor for John could not be found. Without a viable donor, the medical team had to deliver the crushing news to John that he probably had less than a month left to live. Yet, even when confronted with this dire prognosis, his will to fight never wavered. He chose to undergo an incredibly high-risk procedure known as an autotransplantation, which had a mere 7% chance of success. Miraculously, against all conceivable odds, the procedure was a triumph. The tumor vanished, and John was well enough to go home to his family. It truly felt like a miracle had occurred, and for a brief time, everyone allowed themselves to believe he had conquered the disease for good. But that hope was short-lived. In September of 1994, only a few months after coming home, John's lungs collapsed, and he was rushed back to the hospital. Despite every setback, John continued his battle with extraordinary courage. He was readmitted to the hospital in February of 1995 for another round of chemotherapy, only to receive the final, heartbreaking update. The cancer had metastasized throughout his entire body, and there were no further treatment options available. On March 20th, 1995, John Minton's fight came to a peaceful end. He passed away, having faced his illness with the very same unyielding determination that had defined his career in the squared circle. He was buried in his home state of Pennsylvania. In 2004, Big John Studd's enduring legacy in professional wrestling was officially cemented with his posthumous induction into the WWE Hall of Fame. Reflecting on the career of Big John Studd, it becomes apparent that he is one of the most underrated giants in the history of the sport. His most vital contribution was his pivotal role in elevating the stardom of icons like Hulk Hogan and Andre the Giant. Serving as one of the premier villains of the mid-1980s, both in terms of his imposing physical stature and his villainous persona, Studd was the ideal antagonist for these heroes to overcome and further solidify their legacies. Although Andre and Hogan were already established superstars before their paths crossed with Studd, their feuds with him rank among their most unforgettable. Defeating a man of Big John Studd's caliber was a major accomplishment. His sheer size and dominant presence made any victory against him feel truly momentous. Time and again, Studd demonstrated his immense value to the business, from his early days as part of the Executioners to his incredibly effective tag team with King Kong Bundy, and, most notably, his box office smash rivalry with Andre the Giant, which sold out arenas across the country. Even if his 1988 return didn't recapture the magic of his prime, Big John Studd's overall contribution to the world of wrestling is far greater than he is often given credit for. If you enjoyed this retrospective on the life and career of Big John Studd, showing your support helps us continue to tell these important stories. Model. For more in-depth explorations into the annals of wrestling and the incredible stories of the icons who forged the sport, be sure to join our community. Activate your alerts so you're always the first to know when we release new content. Head down to the comments section and tell us about your single most unforgettable moment featuring the legendary Big John Studd. We are genuinely interested in reading your perspective.